For over 3 decades, the world has operated under a simple, unspoken rule. There was one dominant power and everyone else. One country with unmatched military reach. One economy setting the rules. One system shaping global order. But that era is ending. And what's replacing it might be far more dangerous. After the Cold War, the global system became something rare in history, unpolar. One superpower, the United States, stood above all others. This wasn't just about military strength. It meant controlling global trade routes, influencing international institutions, acting as the default crisis manager. When conflicts broke out, there was usually one question: what will the US do? And whether people agreed or not, that predictability created a kind of stability. Not peace, but order. A system where rules were enforced selectively, conflicts were managed imperfectly, power was centralized clearly. But now, that structure is fracturing. Today, power is spreading. China is reshaping global trade and infrastructure. Russia is asserting military influence in its sphere. India is emerging as a demographic and economic force. Regional blocs are becoming more independent. Instead of one center of gravity, the world now has several. This is what analysts call a multipolar world. And at first glance, that sounds fair. More balance, more voices, less domination. But history tells a different story. Because when power is shared among many, stability becomes harder to maintain. Imagine a world with just 2 rivals. There's tension, but it's manageable, predictable. Now imagine 5 major powers, each with their own interests, alliances, and ambitions. Suddenly, the number of relationships doesn't just increase, it multiplies. More actors means more rivalries, more misunderstandings, more opportunities for conflict. It's no longer a single line of tension, it's a web. And in a web, any movement can trigger something unexpected. In a unipolar world, there's a kind of informal referee, not neutral, not always fair, but present. In a multipolar world, that referee disappears. No single country has both the power and legitimacy to enforce global rules. So what happens? Rules don't vanish, but they become optional. Different regions start playing by different standards, and enforcement becomes inconsistent. One country invades a neighbor and faces sanctions. Another does the same and faces silence. The system becomes selective, fragmented, and unpredictable. Institutions like the UN, WTO, and IMF were designed for a different era. An era where cooperation, at least among major powers, was possible. But in a multipolar world, those institutions start to weaken because powerful countries no longer agree on what the rules should be, who should enforce them, or whether they should exist at all. Instead of strengthening global systems, countries begin building alternatives, parallel institutions, competing alliances, separate financial systems. The result? Not one global order, but several overlapping ones. And they don't always cooperate. Direct conflict between major powers is rare, especially in a nuclear age. So competition moves elsewhere, into smaller regions, local conflicts, fragile states. Instead of fighting each other directly, major powers support opposing sides, funding, weapons, intelligence, influence. What looks like a local war becomes something much bigger, a proxy battlefield. And in a multipolar world, this dynamic intensifies because more powers are involved, more interests are at stake, and more actors are willing to intervene. For decades, globalization created a deeply interconnected world. Trade linked economies, supply chains crossed continents, and that interdependence acted as a stabilizer, because when countries rely on each other economically, conflict becomes costly. But that system is now breaking apart. Trade is becoming political, supply chains are being reshaped around alliances, technology ecosystems are splitting into competing blocks. Instead of one global economy, we're seeing several, each with its own rules, its own standards, its own dependencies. And as interdependence decreases, so does the cost of conflict. This is where things get truly unstable. In a unipolar world, outcomes are relatively predictable. You might not like the decisions, but you can anticipate them. In a multipolar world, predictability disappears. Alliances shift, interests collide, signals get misread, and intentions become unclear. This uncertainty creates the perfect conditions for miscalculation. A small action can be interpreted as a threat. A regional conflict can spiral into something global, not because anyone planned it, but because no one fully understands the system they're operating in. But here's the key insight. The most dangerous phase isn't the destination, it's the transition. Right now, the old system is fading, but the new one isn't fully formed. We're in between worlds, and in that gap, power vacuums emerge. Rules become unclear, and competition intensifies. History shows that periods like this, when power structures shift, are often the most volatile, because rising powers want more influence, and established powers don't want to lose it. Supporters of multipolarity argue that a balanced world is safer. No single country dominates. Power is distributed. Voices are diversified, and in theory, that should reduce conflict. But balance doesn't guarantee stability. In fact, it can do the opposite. Because when multiple powers are evenly matched, none can easily dominate the others, and that creates constant tension. A system where everyone is strong enough to compete, but no one is strong enough to control. Which means conflicts don't disappear, they linger, they escalate, and they become harder to resolve. We're already seeing the outlines of this new reality. Different regions aligning with different powers, different economic systems operating in parallel, different narratives competing for influence. It's no longer one global story, it's several. Overlapping, conflicting, and constantly shifting. And in that environment, cooperation becomes more difficult because every decision is filtered through competition. Not exactly. The United States remains one of the most powerful actors in the world, militarily, economically, technologically, but dominance doesn't have to disappear completely to become less effective. What's changing is not just power, but control. The ability to shape outcomes unilaterally, to set the rules and expect others to follow. That era is fading, and what replaces it is less clear, less stable, and far more contested. So here's the real question. Is a world with many powers more fair? Maybe. More balanced? Possibly. But more stable? History suggests not necessarily, because when power is concentrated, the system is rigid but predictable. When power is distributed, the system is flexible but chaotic. And right now, we're moving toward that chaos. Not a collapse, not a single global conflict, but a world defined by constant competition, regional instability, shifting alliances, and rising uncertainty. A world where no one is fully in control. The end of dominance doesn't mean the beginning of peace. Sometimes it's the beginning of something far more unpredictable. Multipolar world order, stability, or the next global crisis.